Hey guys, Action Jackson here. It's been a little bit since I made another video, so I wanted to throw something together. The main topic of this one is going to be another deck building video. I'm going to go over some green-blue stuff. I might throw in some green-red stuff. We'll see how long it takes me to go through some green-blue stuff. I actually received a viewer deck to go over that was green-blue, and so I figured it'd be kind of cool to look at what he did and maybe what I would change to make something a little more competitive. There's definitely maybe four cards in green specifically that have yet to be revealed that I would argue are kind of critical to most of the competitive green decks that I've seen. There's also a blue card that has yet to be revealed that I think is super important for most green-blue lists. So what I'll be making isn't necessarily top tier, but the good thing about green-blue is actually there are a lot of ways of building the lists that I think, maybe some more experimentation is needed, but I think a lot of them are pretty good. Before I get to that though, I want to talk a little bit about some of the content I'm going to be doing on the channel. So if you just want to see the deck building stuff, I'll leave a timestamp below, but if you want to catch the preamble as usual, here we go. Alright, so first things first, I know a lot of people really enjoyed the packs analysis that I did. I think I will probably do one more YouTube packs analysis. I don't know, disclaimer, when the beta is going to be going into the open phase, but it probably isn't too far away. I mean, we're already in the middle of October, and it's meant to be an October thing. So I want to focus more of my attention on creating sort of some of the stuff I need for my content post-beta release. And that content, let me know what you guys think and what you want to see. But my current plans for that content are, one, as I've already talked about, I'm going to go through every single card and rate it, pretty much primarily based on constructed. I'm not much of a limited player. I know, as an aside, that lots of people, especially influencers, have been talking about the fact that they really, really like draft mode. And it's fun, but I'm much more about constructed, and there's a bigger contingent of people than many might realize that feel the same way. There's some stuff in the beta, because they're trying to test draft a lot right now, that has been incentivizing people to play it a lot. So I think a big part of the reason why you might hear people saying, oh, it's hard to find a game of constructed, it isn't necessarily because constructed isn't fun. Like, constructed is super fun, but it's not really what Valve needs to test. They're pretty happy, I think, with how constructed is, and they've created some systems that kind of incentivize people to play draft. So that's the first thing. I'm going to be primarily focusing on constructed with my card review, I guess. And the way I'm actually going to frame it is kind of like a buy list suggestion, because obviously you can actually just go get the cards in Artifact. I'm basically going to give every card a rating somewhere between incredibly niche to must play. And then I'm going to say, hey, I think you should buy this or not. Because some of the cards, even cards that are good, doesn't necessarily mean that you should pick them up early. Like, maybe they don't fit into any obvious deck archetypes, or, I anticipate them being countered quickly. And so, from the perspective of what you should buy upon release, is really the way I'm going to be looking at the video. One other cool thing that I'm excited about is that me and a few of the other people in the beta that I've been playing a lot with, especially constructed, because we're kind of a group of primarily constructed players, are planning on starting a project. We're going to do a podcast. I know everyone and their mother is doing a podcast nowadays, but ours is going to be a little different. It's going to be very, at least the plan is right now, very narrowly focused on constructed play, which I think should give it an interesting niche. And we've got people from, myself in the esports industry, a couple of other people in the esports industry that are working on it. So the perspective is going to be a little different than that of strictly like influencer guys. Hopefully that'll be kind of exciting for you. There's a lot of different stuff we're going to be doing other than the podcast as well. One of the things I'm particularly excited about is if any of you guys follow Magic the Gathering, there's a really cool series called the Versus series by Star City Games, where essentially they take two decks, they talk about them a little bit, and they playtest together on camera and talk about the decks in their playtesting. So that's one of the things we're going to be doing. I think that's going to be really useful to a lot of people when they first check out the open beta. So be sure to keep your eyes peeled for that. I'll have more information on the channel when things move a little bit forward with that. Also, this coming weekend on Sunday, maybe from, let's say, 1 p.m. PST, I'm considering doing a Twitch stream where I actually analyze games from packs just back-to-back live. And if you want to come in and ask me questions about the beta, to the extent that I'm able, I will answer them. If people have questions about some of the plays that I'm suggesting or talking about, then I'll be able to address those live. Also, Danny Dem, I believe is his name, made a really cool overlay that I'm going to test out because it should work on the recordings as much as in the game. So, yep, I'm pretty pumped for that. I'll see if people are interested in it. If you want to check it out on Sunday, my Twitch is twitch.tv/AJcasts. No underscore. There's an underscore on my Twitter, but not on my Twitch. So, yeah, be sure to check that out. Without further ado, though, I think it's time that we start talking about these green-blue deck lists. All right, so first things first, let's have a look at the user-submitted deck that I got. It's called UG Creep, and it was submitted to me by Andrew Johnson in the YouTube comment section. And by the way, if any of you guys have decks that you've been brewing up on one of these deck building sites, want to get my thoughts on it, or maybe see how you can improve it, feel free to drop a link to that into the comments, and I will maybe do a mailbag style video later on down the line. Okay, so let's start off and think about what this deck is trying to accomplish. As I mentioned before, when you're deck building, a good place to start is to look at kind of the core cards that make sense in the archetype, and then move backwards from there towards the heroes, and then kind of the techie cards. So, got some kind of green-blue list. It seems, by the name and also by the Enchantress and Omni Knight, that, and also the Venomancer, that this is kind of a creep-focused list. Enchantress and Omni Knight, both very strong heroes when it comes to sustaining your creeps through combat. I've actually been brewing a lot of red-green mid-range just because I feel like I didn't give the deck a fair shake early in the beta, and these two heroes are very important in that list. Something that maybe isn't obvious is how good Red Mist Pillager is with both of these. I'll let you guys think about that a little bit, unless I talk about it later. So anyway, in a creep-based list in green and blue, what are the main things that you're going to want? Well, let's open this in the builder so I can have access to all the cards. All right, so green-blue. Let's talk about the cards that are kind of gimmies, right? The ones that you really just definitely want to include in your list. I definitely like the fact that he's running Mist of Avernus. I think that's a pretty key card. Celemania's Favor is actually kind of interesting that he's put this in. I don't necessarily feel like this deck needs the ramp other than for Hand of God, but we'll get to that a little later. I think Chen is probably not something you want to include in most of your green-blue lists. Let's see. Aghanim Sanctum, this makes a lot of sense. We'll go over some combos you can do specifically in green-blue with this a little later when I break down my suggested list, but you can do some pretty degenerate things with Aghanim Sanctum and green-blue. Conflagration, having 2 of that seems okay. I might consider having 3, especially because with Prey on the Weak, anything that damages your opponent's creeps prior to the main action phase lets you Prey on the Weak for more, so this card actually synergizes really nicely, and I'd probably add an additional one. Act of Defiance, this seems, on the face of things, to really make sense in a green-blue creep deck, but in actuality, it's pretty slow, and investing just into buffing your creeps early on isn't always going to pan out, especially because you're running Kana, and Kana in your first 3. This means that, maybe you spawn Chen into Kana's lane on turn 2, and then you get a decent Act of Defiance, but really, when you want Act of Defiance is like later, right? When you have Prey on the Weak, and in those later phases, you're scared of things like Annihilation. So, I've not seen much success with Act of Defiance. To be honest, the thing that does the same thing, but arguably a little better, is Emissary of the Quorum. This is just a very mid-rangey way of doing it, and it's not really the way I've seen the most success with the deck. Defensive Bloom, I probably would pass on this card too. I think that it is okay, but not great. D-Portal makes a lot of sense in the version of the list that you're running. The most interesting thing to me is actually the heroes. So this list is very linear, right? Like, it does, if you look at it holistically, it does kind of one thing. It plays a lot of creeps and it buffs them. And that's really weak to certain things. It's really weak to things like Lich and Chain Frost, even with the little bit of armor, potentially, depending on how things go. It's pretty weak to Annihilation. There are some other blue spells that you're going to want to be afraid of. Let's see how many of them are revealed. You know, considering the cards that have been revealed, honestly, I don't think that this is a bad list. I think that this is pretty reasonable. The biggest changes that I would make is probably taking out Defensive Blooms, taking out one Active Defiance, because it seems greedy to me to have 3, taking out the Salamani's Favor. Satyr Duelist also kind of... Let's see. Let's just start again. Alright, so now we're going to build my version of this, which tries to hold true to the theme a little bit. First things first, I think you kind of still want Annihilations even in this list. There are few lists that don't want Annihilation, let's put it that way. And I'd actually run 3. Active Defiance, let's keep that a 2 of. I can see it maybe working out. Probably want at least 1 Corrosive Mist in there. D-Portal, I think 3 of those is fine. 3 Emissaries, maybe 2. 2 is probably fine. Rebel Decoy is kind of crazy in a green mid-range deck, so I would definitely keep that in. Satyr Magician is actually an interesting idea. I like one of those to go with maybe like 2 Sanctums. Conflags, I'd run 3. 3 Mists. Oh, and definitely 3 Unearthed Secrets. So we're going to have to cut something. Probably one of the Annihilations. Then hero-wise, the way that I would recommend building this includes Drow. So just trust me on that one. Even the Premier card hasn't been revealed. Then, other than that, I would definitely go Kana for what you're trying to do. I would not go Venomancer. I think that Venomancer is extremely weak. And I don't... You already have enough ways of making creeps. Like, do you really need more, is the question when it comes to Venomancer. And the answer is probably not. You know, Kana, for a start, playing Venomancer and Kana in the same deck is actually really awkward. Because if you don't play Venomancer into Kana's lane, you're not getting any value out of the Plague Wards other than chump blockers. Because there's no minions spawning, no melee creeps spawning, that let you hopefully get one of your Plague Wards into a good position. Like, if you're in a lane with, let's say, Venomancer and Treant or something, and they just have stuff. At the beginning of your turn, where are those Venom Wards going to go that's actually that useful? I feel like Kana and Venomancer kind of fight a little bit, so I wouldn't really go for that. Also, you'll notice my list is a little more blue than yours was, I believe. So I would probably have 3 blue heroes, 2 green. And Zeus is actually one of the ones that I would go for. You're going to be dealing a lot of chip damage / ambient damage through all your creeps. And so Zeus actually has good odds of getting off nice Thunder God's Wraths. Ogre Magi is probably the 3rd one that I would run. Again, I know you guys don't know his Premier card, but the key thing with Ogre Magi is how insane it is to possibly duplicate Prey on the Weak, Thunder God's Wrath, maybe even a D-Portal. Like, all of the spells that are in blue in this list are, like, pretty insane to duplicate. And both of these cards have Premier spells that you're not going to be unhappy to have in your deck. In terms of what I would go for the final one, I really like Treant Protector, both because the ambient armor that it provides keeps your wide creep board alive, and you know, you're really... That's the plan, at least with the concept that you came up with. Plus, ramping a little bit, like this... The ramp that you get, firstly, is through a creep, so that's another creep to add to your collection of things that you can buff up. But additionally, it's more proactive than a Salamani's Favor, and you're more of a mid-range deck. Like, getting +1 mana on, let's say you play it on turn 5, or mana turn 5, that means you can Thunder Gods on mana turn 6. Whereas if you'd Salamania it on 4, mana turn 4, that is, sure, you could do the same thing on turn 5, but you didn't do anything proactive in order to get there. It's vulnerable to a different kind of removal that's more common in the form of improvement removal. So I definitely like Treant a lot. So for hero deployment, it's actually pretty interesting because you really want high chances of playing your green spells on turn 1. But the problem that you'll have if you go for that route is that because Kana is in your first 3, and you want her in your first 3 because you want to snowball a lane with this deck, you won't be able to play a green hero if you go for this starting lineup into Kana's lane on turn 2. And you really want to, right? Like, you want to be able to play Active Defiance. That's kind of cool. As a result, I would probably swap like this and have Ogre in the first 3. It's not great, to be completely honest. Maybe Zeus, actually. I like keeping Ogre until later, because you're not going to be able to play any of your 4-mana spells on turn 1. And if he dies on turn 1, then you have to wait till... I mean, I guess you have to wait till turn 5 here anyway. Yeah, the way that things have been revealed, this is kind of what I was saying. Like, it's pretty hard to build green-blue decks with what's out right now. But I think this is okay. You could win games with this for sure. And then I actually really like Blink Daggers in green-blue lists. I think 2 Ob Orbs is pretty key. Pick up some... Hey, 1 more Blink Dagger. I actually like Phase Boots a lot in this list. And then possibly 2 Short Swords. This is quite a well-rounded deck. Maybe it's a little heavy on attack items. Maybe you could remove one of these and put in a short cloak thing. Traveler's Cloak. But yeah, this is how I would edit the list that you provided. I think you'll find it a little more consistent than what you did. It can fight along more axes with more controlling spells at the top. It has things like Phase Boots and Roll Decoy to keep your heroes safe. Yeah, I think this is fine. Alright, so now let's look at a green-blue list that's something more like what is being played in the beta and more like what I would suggest checking out. There is one card, at least, which really upgrades what you're about to see into something that's kind of crazy. Essentially what I'm going to do, some of you might have heard of a combo list that Joel Larson, Hefeklumpen, I think is how you pronounce it, created. I think he had someone he created it with, but I don't know who. And it was kind of the bane of the beta for a long time, because it does some really degenerate things, and I'm going to illustrate a bit of that too. So I'm going to build out the list, and then I'm going to talk about what makes it do crazy shit. So, this is a control list. You're going to want to have at least a couple of annihilations in here. I'm actually gonna... I got all my deck lists, and you know, once the beta comes out, once all the cards are revealed, I think I'm just gonna post all the deck lists. I've got a Google Doc. I've been tracking the best lists for 7 months, so hopefully I'll be able to show that to you guys sometime soon. But yeah, so the list runs 2 Annihilation, because that's pretty important for most of these things. Diabolic Revelation in a Kana list is pretty important. Probably should have put that in the version I did, if I didn't already, for the last list. I've already forgotten. But, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily play a creep-centered deck anyway. Diabolic Revelation, 2 Cunning Plan is pretty solid. Not necessary, but pretty good. It's a combo deck, so Foresight is really good, and you're hoping to duplicate that a lot of the time with Ogre Magi. Just to get some incredibly ridiculous amount of card draw. I'm going to put in a placeholder for Stars Align. That card got revealed today, and it isn't out yet. So imagine that Wrath of Gold is Stars Align. There's one other card that hasn't been revealed, so I'll put Buying Time in place of that. For creeps, the version that I like to run runs 2 Satyr Magicians, and I'll explain why in a little bit. You also need 2 Emissary of the Quorum. Aghanim Sanctum you want 2 or 3 of. We'll do 3. Honor Secrets I run 2 of. And I believe that is it for that stuff. And then for your heroes, you want to have Kana for sure. You want to have Treant Protector, Ogre Magi, and Zeus. And Drow Ranger. So I know the premier spells haven't been revealed for these 2 heroes. Just trust me that they're important. Drow Ranger, I believe her perk has been revealed, but in case I'm misremembering, I'm not going to say what it does. It should be obvious if it has been revealed why it's good here. Okay, so we're 1 card short. What would I add? A Corrosive Mist could be a good addition. Alternatively, actually, you know what? I'm going to cut the Cunning Plans and put in a different placeholder. I just realized I updated my list since I wrote this down. So yeah, this is roughly the list. Let's talk about what makes it crazy. Oh, after we do items. This deck likes to have Blink Daggers. You don't want your Kana stuck in a lane that you can't get her out of, that can be kind of devastating sometimes. But additionally, having them to like reposition for annihilations and that kind of thing is good. Not everyone runs annihilations, but I like it in this list. The health item of choice is not revealed yet, so I'm going to put in Traveler's Cloaks. 1 Phase Boots is pretty good here, and then 2 Obliterating Orbs. I am going to put the Cunning Plans in, actually. Okay, so this is an extremely close deck list to Heffa Klumpen Joel Larson's combo list, which most people, by the way, in Magic there's a type of deck called Storm, where basically you play lots and lots of cards and then something big happens. And because a lot of the players, like Joel, for example, come from a Magic the Gathering background, this deck has been dubbed something that I'm not going to say because it's one of the unrevealed cards, followed by the word Storm. And that confuses / frustrates a lot of new people because they're like, oh, it has Storm Spirit in it. It doesn't have Storm Spirit in it. I've heard suggested maybe renaming the deck to this thing Blitz, which I think would be pretty cool. But for now, I'm going to refer to this deck as Storm because that's what everyone refers to it currently. I'm going to give you a second, pause the video, think about what the most broken thing this deck can do is. Alright, I'm going to assume you come back, you've thought about it a little bit. So, the most broken thing that this deck can do is on turn 2, make like 8 Hounds of War, and 4-ish of them are buffed with Emissary of the Quorum on turn 2. If you didn't see how, don't beat yourself up too much. It's kind of hard, and it sounds like a dream scenario combo, right? Like it sounds like this could never happen, but I assure you it can. Basically, if you imagine that no heroes die on turn 1, and your starting hand consists of Celemany's Favor, Aghanim's Sanctum, Prey on the Weak, Foresight, Diabolic Revelation, and Emissary of the Quorum, right? And keep in mind, that's only like, what, 5 cards that I referenced? So that's only your turn 1 cards. On turn 2, you might actually draw more of what you need. On turn 1, nothing really happens. Like, you don't even need to draw your 3-cost cards. On turn 2, if Kana's in the 3rd lane, right? Let's assume like one of her starting creeps died, but she had both spawn there the first round. And then round 2, 2 more spawn in. So you have Kana, 3 creeps, one of which is damaged, Kana's probably damaged, and then you spawn in Drow, okay? So 5 units total, 2 are damaged. So on lane 1, depending on if you have Treant or Ogre there, you play Celemany's Favor or Ag Sanctum in the 3rd lane. In lane 2, you play whichever the other one was. When you get to the 3rd lane, this is where things get a bit crazy. So to begin with, sorry, I forgot you need Stars Align in your hand. To begin with, you have access to 8 mana, right? 4 and then refresh, and 12 mana, 6 and then refresh and then 6. If you play Stars Align, right, now your maximum mana on the tower is 9. So you're floating 8, right? You're at 6, you net 2 from Stars Align, you're floating 8 mana. You play Foresight, if you need to, draw some cards. Then you play Diabolic Revelation, draw some cards. Then if you have another Stars Align, keep in mind you've just drawn 4 cards, you play that and Prey on the Weak. Then you refresh your tower's mana. You play another Aghanim Sanctum if you've drawn one. Play another Foresight or something. Like, the specifics don't matter too much, the order in which you do it. Okay, so you've damaged all your things. You have like 4 things left on the board that are damaged, and you've drawn a bunch of cards, and you've played your second Aghanims. Then you play Prey on the Weak, right? So, assuming that he has no damage minions, which is unlikely, you're making 4 Hounds of War. You now have 8 units. 4 of them are 2/1s, 4 of them are slightly damaged somethings. Then you refresh your mana again, right? And this works even better if you've Stars Aligned twice. You refresh your mana again, play Emissary of the Quorum, because you've drawn that. You buff all your things, and now you have 4 3s, and then 4 damaged other things that have been buffed as 2/2s. If you've been able to refresh your mana again, which maybe you could have, then you can make more Hounds of War, and you can even Diabolic Rev the Hounds of War that are now 4/3s because they survive on 1 health. So it's possible there are versions of this deck, and again, there's one key card that hasn't been revealed, and I'm not going to spoil, but there's versions of this deck that can do a lot more as early as turn 2 than even what I've just described. Personally, my favorite versions of this list aren't that greedy, like they don't go all in on the combo early on. But as you can see, it's very possible to get some pretty crazy amounts of damage on the board extremely fast. And like, what do other decks do against that? Think about it, right? Like, what can decks do as early as turn 2 to interrupt your combo? That being said, often it's wrong to slash you one of the pieces to combo as early as turn 2, and that's where things like Obliterating Orb, like the reason I run 2 of them in every deck, is because if people start playing this again, I want to be able to Obliterating Orb their Aghanim Sanctum during their combo, so that they, like, let's say they Stars Align and then draw some cards and then Prey on the Weak and they're about to refresh, that's when you hit the Sanctum, because now they've just made a bunch of sort of weakling dudes and they don't get to play their Emissary. And keep in mind, the Stars Align is temporary, so you're actually doubly hurting them because they're not going to have the mana to do all the crazy stuff again next turn and they burn a card. Anyway, this deck is bananas. A lot of people think that it is not as good as it once was, and part of the reason for that is things like the Obliterating Orb tech or Smash the Defenses have become more commonplace to deal with Sanctum. Personally, I think this deck is still fantastic. I just think that the build of it should be slower and more consistent rather than explosive. Like, the version that I run doesn't run any Salamini's favor, so you can imagine what that does to the consistency of your turn 2 craziness. But, yeah, this is missing, I'd say, it's missing 2 cards, but one of them is critical and one of them is not. And so once that critical card comes out, I will do an addendum and talk about the full list and just how insane things get. For the time being, just know that this combo deck exists. It's something that I think is a kind of check and balance on the metagame. Like, if people start to get too greedy along certain axes, like if people start to play like red-black hero killer, this deck becomes really good, because you don't really care. You just combo a little later and then kill them. And in addition to that, like, the thing that has really kept this deck in check as much as the Obliterating Orb tech is actually black-blue control, because Vesture of the Tyrant makes all of those small 2/1s not do anything. Even if they get buffed by Emissary, like, once, they're doing 1 damage each, which is not the end of the world. I actually run Satyr Magician, and most people don't, because I want to dodge things like Orb and Smash their defenses, and not many people run Slay. So, just delays your combo potentially a turn later, because it's 5 mana versus 4. But by having both, you actually increase the redundancy of the effect in your deck. So, that's pretty good. Corrosive Mist is another thing that I'm doing because black-blue control is really good right now, which is the first deck I did a tech on. If you guys want to check that out, it's a few videos back. But yeah, this deck is crazy. It's really fun to play. It's pretty hard to play perfectly, but not terribly hard to play well. So with that being said, let's move on and check out a red-green mid-range deck that I've been working on. Well, I just realized I built this list and I had stopped the recording for some reason. So I'm just going to go through the list as opposed to building it live, because I don't want to do that again. I'm losing my voice a little bit already. So, red-green mid-range. This is actually a deck list that I brewed a couple of days ago, and I've been trying as much as I can find constructed games to get games in with it. I was actually playing against green-blue control, although a slightly different variation to what I showed earlier. It had one of the craziest games I've ever had with this deck. I had a lane with like 10 red mist pillagers that were buffed up by mists, and I was hitting for like 100 damage the next turn, but then he conflagrationed it, and then the next round his Vesture was blocking the 3 damage from my nether wards that his 3 health tower would have died to, but then he accidentally annihilationed the lane and lost Vesture and died to the Pugna nether ward tick. It was a great game. I really, really enjoyed it, and it was very funny. But let's talk about why this deck works. So, red-green midrange is an interesting archetype. It is very vulnerable to things like Annihilation and board clears, which makes it kind of difficult to justify running. Omni Knight and Enchantress, if you get their premier spells online early enough, can defend against some of that stuff. But honestly, I think once the card that I'm subbing in enough magic for, this card is not normally in the list, is revealed, I'll do an addendum, and you'll see immediately why this list works. Because it is pretty important to actually have that. I just realized I did forget to place the heroes in the right order. But basically, the idea of the list is to be truly mid-range rather than ramp. Like, you're not running Salamani's Favors, you're not trying to get out early Ogre Conscripts or something. You're not even ramping to your Time of Triumph and Spring the Trap. You're just playing really awesome creeps, like Pillagers, on curve, hopefully, if you've developed the improvements to protect them ahead of time. And then, just going crazy off the back of that. Unearthed Secrets is the key to a lot of green decks, because it draws you the cards that you otherwise don't have access to. Smash the Defenses, key tech card, because improvements are insane. You can imagine how awesome it is to be able to interrupt an Aghanim Sanctum blue-green player when they're comboing off with Prey on the Weak. They stars align, they draw a bunch of cards, and then you smash their defenses, and they can't refresh their Aghanim Sanctum midway through the combo. So that's always fun. Orb does the same thing, but allows you to do it if they've cleared your lane or something like that. Beastmaster is probably an interesting include to some of you guys. Firstly, he summons a dude, and dudes are great in mid-range. But secondly, Primal Roar is way fucking better than people think it is. The reason why is that an artifact soft removal, so soft removal being I'm going to move your dude to another lane versus I'm going to kill your dude, which is hard removal. Soft removal is actually really good in Artifact because it doesn't let them redeploy. And sometimes that is actually better than killing their hero and letting them redeploy to defend the lane that you're trying to win in. Fight Through the Pain, basically default in any red list, not running Tidehunter. I think the only other thing that's interesting, I guess Pugna's kind of interesting. I know some people don't rate him super highly. I think improvement removal is insane right now, and getting better by the day based on the decks that I'm seeing. But additionally, Nether Wards in a control-based meta is really good. As I said, I won a game from that card just yesterday. And then the item deck's kind of interesting. I think 3 Stonehall Pikes would probably make some people confused. But I actually really like these in this list. Your heroes are extremely robust and only get more robust over the course of the game with things like Enchantress Passive, Omni Knight's Heal, All Seeing One's Favor, Verdant Refuge. I had a 22 attack Enchantress that never died, like from turn 1 of the game, in the game that I played yesterday. And Stonehall Pike was, I think, about 10 of that attack. So it can really help you win games, and that's why it's in here. Arguably, like in some versions of this list, you might do something like get rid of the Stonehalls, put in, okay, one of them isn't revealed. Glad I didn't say the name. Put in things like Traveler's Cloaks and maybe Blink Daggers. That'd be fine. But if you were to do this, this would open you up to being able to say, okay, well, maybe instead of Spring the Trap, I'm going to play Corrosive Mist or something like that. Corrosive Mist is awful with the Stonehall items. You lose so much value if you go for that. You'd much rather have things that give immediate value relative to their cost, or very expensive things that you just wait until after you miss to play. But I personally like the Stonehall variant for this list. It's done me pretty well so far. So yeah, this deck's pretty cool. I've been having a lot of success with it in the games that I've been trying it out. The Red Mist Pillager lanes can get really out of control. Once you guys can see this card, I'll do an addendum, because it is a big one for a lot of lists, this one included. It can be the difference maker for sure. But hopefully you guys enjoyed these deck lists. I was a little rambly. I hope that the points I made were coherent and got you thinking about cool ideas for deck lists. And if you want to check out my next PAX analysis content on Sunday, I'm going to say around 1 p.m., unless there's a tournament and I do well and I get to day 2. Who knows? It's draft. I don't really draft. But, unless anything crazy happens, twitch.tv/AJCast, Sunday, 1 p.m. PST, I will do, I don't know, a couple of hours of PAX analysis. And if you want to ask me questions, feel free to hop in the chat and check it out. All right, thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you next time.